Hey guys, so great to see you.
Hi, thanks for
Hey,
having
it's
us.
great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Hi, and welcome to the Parents Guide for Raising Happy, Healthy, and Resilient Children. I am Lauren Nickerson. Now, this show is produced in partnership with the Beach Cities Health District and South Bay Mommies and Daddies. Tonight, we're talking about how to support your young children's social and emotional health during this crazy pandemic that we're in. And so we have some excellent people here to talk about this. I'd like to introduce Joni Plake. Now, she is the founder and CEO of Breathe and Learn, and Abby Withy, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, thanks
Thanks
for
for
having us.
having us.
Well, let's just jump right into it. Abby, I'm going to start with you. Now, this is a question most parents are talking about right now, which is we're working from home, we have our kids at home, and we have
Mhm.
no extra care. So, the easiest thing to do, of course, is to throw them on a device all day. And that does make it easier, but what else
Sure.
can we be doing? That's the big question.
Yeah, I mean, this is a time where we've all had to get really creative, right? And so devices are the easiest thing to do, but they're not necessarily the best thing to do in the short term or the long term for our kids' health and for our kids' brains. And so we want to get creative. One of the things that I did early on was I asked my mom to FaceTime my daughter and do sight words. So I have a little kindergartner. So we made some flashcards with sight words, and Nana was on the FaceTime doing sight words. So, still a device, but at least we're learning, right? We went on mindful walks. So, this is kind of in Joni's territory, but we did some mindful walks together at lunchtime. And we said, we started to engage all of our senses. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? Scavenger hunts are a great way to engage our kids off of devices. Getting them outside obviously is wonderful. Playing games inside of the house. And of course, we all have toys in our house. So once you remove the devices, we engage the things our kids were born with, which is their brains. And they find things to do. They can cook with us. They start playing. They use Play-Doh. They use blocks. They use the things that they're meant to be doing, which is playing.
Would you
And they get
suggest
super creative.
Would you suggest that parents that are working maybe take scheduled breaks throughout the course of the day, if it's possible, with your job, if you're working from home, to set up things for the kids to do? Because I know it can be really hard when you're trying to focus on one thing and then a young child is needing that constant attention. How do we balance that?
You know what? That's a lovely, lovely idea. If it's possible for parents, and that's great for the parent too. It's hard to be on Zoom all day. It's hard to work all day, and it's great for your mind and for your child to take those breaks and to interact with one another. And as adults, it's wonderful to get on the floor and play with your kid as well. For us to revert back to our childlike selves and have that time is also a great break in our day.
Good for them, good for us. Now, Joni, do you have anything to add to that?
I like the part that you asked, should we create these little breaks if it's doable for the parents at home? And I think absolutely, like to me, that's proactive, right? Before something goes wrong, you're creating those times to connect with your child because really that's all, they just want your attention, right? I mean, that's the blessing and the curse of being home right now is, right, you're there and they love that. I mean, a lot of kids, as much as this has been a challenging time, when I'm working with them and what I hear from them is like they kind of love it too. Like mom and dad are home or, grandma's home, whoever's home with them, like they're craving that connection. So if you can schedule, layer those times in, I think throughout the day, then that's golden.
Yeah, there's definitely a benefit to this situation. I know, I mean, obviously not, for major health reasons, et cetera, it's been a tough time. But if you have that opportunity to spend a little extra time with your child because you're not commuting or they don't have, all these classes and things and play dates and all the things that take our time up, we can really
Hmm.
kind of look inward a little bit. It is actually something to try to enjoy as best as possible. I do know, though, that a lot of kids they're feeling very anxious. They're feeling really stressed. And so are we as parents. So, in a way, it's easy to say, like, oh, yes, let's all spend time together and play. But really, in the big picture, we're all managing these new stressors. How do we, and I'm going to go ahead and direct this to you, Abby, how do we as parents separate the stress of our lives from putting that on our kids?
Well, the breaks that you talked about before, we as grown-ups need breaks too.
Mhm.
And it's really important to take those breaks when you need them. I think we feel like we have to do it all, and we don't. We are human beings and we need to give ourselves the grace that we would give other people. We all tell our friends, you need to take that break, you need to take that time away, and we need to do that for ourselves. But in the moment, if we have a moment in front of our children and they witness that, that's okay too. That happens. We're human beings. And we circle back around and we explain that to them. Mom and dad had big feelings. We were feeling anxious. We were feeling upset. And we reacted in this way. Here's why. You explain it in child appropriate terms, of course, but then you circle back around, you talk to them about it, and you explain to them, normalizing feelings for kids is a great thing, because then when they have those feelings, they feel normal too.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for normalizing that, because I feel like sometimes as parents, we're so afraid to show our kids anything less than perfection. Calm, unruffled, we've got this, which is completely not true. I don't know a single
Right.
human being who can really live their life that way. And to say to them, it's okay, look, I got really frustrated. I got really upset. I got really worried. Do you feel worried too? How can we feel better together? Or
Hmm.
what can I demonstrate to you to help you feel better when you feel stressed or anxious? I mean, Joni, I would only imagine that a lot of what you do is normalizing pre-pandemic and during pandemic how children feel and how they can release that anxiety and that stress. What are some of
Yes.
your pointers?
I mean, I think, like you said, actually naming the feelings, naming those emotions, being okay with it, that not all emotions, they're not good or bad, they just are, and that we experience them. And again, that's okay. And I think this pandemic has allowed parents and children to connect in that sense more so than ever and see the realness. There's this shared experience because we're all missing the same things. We're all missing our friends. We're all feeling like there's a lot of screen time, right? Sort of no matter our age, there's these commonalities. And I think having those conversations and being very open with your children about that and emotions and just keeping that conversation going is really helpful.
Yeah,
I think,
there's no hiding from each other anymore. We
no.
can't hide anything, but we all, good, bad, or ugly, it's all out there. Do you have any tips or tricks that you suggest for like physicalizing stress release techniques?
Yeah, I would say so. What I mostly work with my kids is mindfulness and yoga, right? So either getting the physical body moving through that can be yoga poses, it can be jumping jacks, any of that. Really, just getting moving because that gets out a lot of energy and even anxiety. And then the mindfulness practice being more of sort of what Abby was talking about at the beginning of noticing what's around us, engaging our senses and then creating time to maybe not sit still and close your eyes in a long meditation, even for younger kids, but bring our attention to our breath. So one thing, like I'll teach children, for example, and parents, when they do recognize, oh, it's time to take a deep breath or we need to calm down, is something like a take 5 breath, where if you have your hand up, you're sort of tracing your hand of inhales and exhales all the way down. So connecting that sensory experience with the breath, breathing together back to back is a really nice way too. And then like the final thing I like to tell parents is come up with a list and actually post that list somewhere of strategies or tools like a breathing exercise or going outside, just a list of things that you can turn to when you're having these feelings or big emotions, so that when they're in it, it's not, oh, breathe, right? Or it's very hard to explain to a child when you're experiencing that big emotion, right, to rationalize. So when they have these tools and you practice them maybe before the behavior happens or before, and you've created this list together, maybe at some calm times, then I think they have strategies and tools to turn to.
Speaking of those big feelings, by the way, I know a lot of families and parents are dealing with the big mood swings, the big high highs, the low lows, and the stress and the resistance. How do we work through that with our kids? Abby, what would you say to that?
I think right now, especially right now, the most important thing we can do is be with them in those feelings.
Mm.
I think it's, as a parent, the thing we want to do is fix it. And especially right now during the pandemic, we can't fix this, right? There's no fixing this. And so to sit with them in that and just to say, I hear you, I'm with you, and not try to fix it, not try to shame them for these feelings, not try to stop them or solve them, and just hear them is a really big deal for kids right now. That's where we have to start. And then in general, with kids and big feelings, especially little kids, I think our reaction as parents is to kind of stiffen up when a feeling comes. And what we need to do again is just be with the kid in the feeling and not react to it, but to respond to it, and to really say to as a parent to say, what is this feeling about, rather than to kind of react and say, why are you having this feeling, or don't have this feeling, which I think is kind of a reaction a lot of parents have, and a reaction a lot of our parents had, and so it's kind of knee jerk for us.
Yeah.
So to sit with it and to be curious about our kids' feelings and to help coach them through their feelings rather than to tell them not to have feelings or to shame them for their feelings. It's I can't tell you the number of clients I see now as adults who what we really work through is that their feelings weren't normalized, seen, or cared for as kids when we really come down to it. So if we can really work on that as parents, we're going to have healthier, more regulated teens and adults.
Well, and the hard thing too for something like that is when your kid has big feelings, 9 times out of 10, you also have big feelings at the same time, be it a
Right.
reaction to what they're doing, or
Hmm.
maybe they're reacting to you, or vice versa. So
Yeah.
then who do we take care of first? Do we put the mask on ourselves and then help the passenger in the plane next to us? Or, do we calm ourselves down first and then deal with their feelings? How do we mutually get ourselves off the edge?
So if we can, if we can deal with it in that moment, we deal with it in that moment. If we need a beat, again, that's great modeling to tell your kid, mommy needs a second. When
Mm.
mommy's having big feelings right now too, let me take a second and go get my big feelings together, and then I'll be right back to handle yours too.
Yeah.
That is awesome modeling, right? Because that's what we want our kids to do is learn to self-regulate. So you're telling your child, I'm not self-regulating. I need to go self-regulate, and then I'll be back to help you. And maybe you can tap in the parent that is self-regulating in that moment and have them come in to
Mm.
self-regulate, right? Or to regulate the child. That's where co-parenting is great. But you also can model to the kid, hey, I'm noticing that I'm having a hard time right now. Or you guys can try to cope together. Let's breathe together.
To the
Let's
valley.
do some, yeah.
Definitely right. I definitely want to do
Hmm.
that. That's a great piece of advice. Is there any, Joni, as we head into what we know might be a stressful day or a stressful period of time, are there self-help techniques that you can give the parents to kind of prepare us for the big feelings we know are coming our way from our little kids?
I think that, well, first and foremost, taking care of yourself, right? Like having those behaviors to model, I think is really important. But if you are heading into, I think, stopping to respond, and just like Abby said, letting them experience that emotion, not trying to fix it. There's a reason they're experiencing that. And so not going out as how can I fix this, but maybe validating it. Like, oh, you look really upset right now, like, do you need a hug? Like, sometimes it's that simple. If someone's crying, rather than saying, like, oh, don't cry, it'll be fine. It's just very easy for us to react in that way. But I think trying to take a breath as a parent, and that response, and just letting them feel it. And then from there, once they do calm down, right, once the hug or the breathing or maybe just modeling it for them, then once they're ready to talk about it, I mean, that's where as a parent, you know your child. When is a good time to discuss, hey, once they're calm, if that happens again, what do you think we could do? I think that's the time to talk about the strategies. It's definitely not when they're in, right, in the big tantrum that you're trying to tell them what to do or how to fix it. And I
You
think
need to
that's a
breathe.
common thing you
Yeah.
want to do though, right?
Yeah.
But that's sort of like what I teach in my classes in the hopes that, you know, when I get the kids, mostly they're not having a tantrum, you know, I'm borrowing them for an hour, they're on good behavior, and I'm hopefully sending them back with these tools and strategies so that when that time comes, they have that to turn to.
Now I want to bring up something that is basically every parent's, for the most part, worst nightmare. The two words every parent dreads to hear: virtual school. I don't know about anybody else, but I know for my family, it's a real challenge. And not only that, we have no skill sets for this. The kids have
Mm-hmm.
no skill sets for this. We as parents have no skill sets for this. So how can we best support our children throughout the course of the day, especially if they're in elementary school, they're just figuring out what school is? How do we best set them up to succeed there? And how can we support them when they're not? Joni, I'm going to go ahead and toss that one to you.
Yeah, so I think what you said at the beginning, we're both experiencing it. So having that honest conversation, this is hard. Like, this isn't normal, this isn't anything we've done before, but we also do hard things. Like, coming back to that balance between we're not just going to give up either. So let's make a plan. You know, if they've had a rough day, what went well, what didn't go so well, right? How can we sort of looking at themselves and almost a self-reflection, having this awareness that, oh wow, the morning meeting goes well, and then by 10 o'clock, that's when it gets hard. So what can we do at that time? Can we take a break? Could we ask your teacher, right? Like this learning to be flexible and really figuring out, I think kids are figuring out what works well for them and what doesn't at a very young age. A lot of kids, there's a handful that really like the independent learning, that love guiding their own. And then you've got the opposite side of the spectrum where this is really, really hard. And so knowing your child, and then I think coming up with a plan. I know that some teachers, it all looks different. I've supported a few kids this year, and teachers are doing an amazing job. Their breaks all look a little bit different. And so if it's working for your child, you know, if those breaks work, great. If it's not, I would say to parents, don't hesitate to reach out to the teacher. I think that as a former teacher, you know, this is, again, in uncharted territories. And so it's okay to ask for a favor. It's okay to say, hey, is it okay if my child takes an extra 15 minutes here or 20 minutes here, if that's going to really change the course of their day? So I think constant check-ins are really important. Even if you're not getting that feedback, I think, again, being proactive, even at dinner, asking a few questions. What's going well? You know, what's a little challenging?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really tough time. And yet, I'm curious, Abby, are there certain skill sets that our children are getting from this that you think are actually positive, that they'll take forward and become better adults because they went through this experience?
I think there will be, but I think it's about how we frame it. You know, I think our children are gaining skills in adaptability and flexibility every single day, but we are the meaning makers for our children, right? And so if we frame it that way, they will take that, you know, and they will run with it. I tell my kids every day, I am so proud of you. You know, nobody asked you to do this. You were told you had to do this, and and my daughter has had to go to kindergarten and then not to kindergarten and then to kindergarten again, and you know, at the age of 6, and that's hard. And you know, I'm so proud of her, and I tell her that all the time. You know, that she's gone back and forth and back and forth, instead of being like, this is stupid and I can't believe that. You know, we could frame that either way for her. You know. But instead I say, look at you adjusting to this over and over again. I am so proud of how resilient you are. And so I am making that meaning for her and telling that story for her, that she is resilient and she is strong. And
You say
so
that so, sorry, go
it is,
ahead.
it's about the meaning we make for them. So yes, I think they will build skills if we build them for them. And so I want us as parents in this community to really watch the meaning we're making for our kids through this, because I know we all have feelings about this and how this has gone for our community and our children. But we're writing the story for them and how they're going to carry this forward and what skills they're going to build from this. And we get that choice about what story we write for them. And so we get to be mindful about that.
I love the way that you say that. I was just thinking, I wish that you could say that to me all the time. Like, you're resilient and you're doing great, mom. Like, you're hanging in there. No, that's such
Mhm.
a positive way to frame it, because it is sometimes so hard to stay positive when everything feels heavy and it feels dark,
Yeah,
you know? The
yeah.
one thing, though, that I know, some kids like virtual learning better than others. Some are better at sort of that executive functioning skills where they're able to sort of organize their own work and their things. But the one thing that all kids that are younger especially are missing is the socialization of being in school. And especially young kids, that's what kindergarten is for. So how do we replace that for them?
That's
Joni?
a really, oh, sorry.
Oh,
No, go
no.
ahead.
I'll say a few things and you can feel free to jump in. But I think obviously they have however they're meeting virtually, right? If there's any way, whatever family members that people at this point I think have created their own pods or whatever community you feel safe in right now, I think that's really important because you don't want to cause more anxiety for yourself either. But in a safe way, I think outdoors, I mean, we're very, very lucky here in Southern California, of course. I mean, we've been hosting very small classes and private groups outside, which is so nice because we do have the outdoors and we're blessed for that. So there is sort of that interaction in a safe way. And then I think even little check-ins like virtually with other people, so it's not just their classroom school day, because I know as much as the teachers try, they're under a lot of pressure too to get the academics in and to get a lot of other important information in throughout the day. And now I think they're trying to even lower screen time. So with that, then is going to come less of the social piece and connecting, unfortunately. So I think scheduled play dates in whatever way you feel safe, even if that is virtually, creating some sort of social interaction outside of the classroom.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I feel like we're always sort of balancing our kids' emotional health and their safety. And it's like, is that, well, what if I go to the park?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, well, they're going to be happy, but then what if I double back? It's just constantly putting a lot of stress on the parents for that. Abby, what do you think about that? What are some ways that we can help socialize our kids in a way that's safe?
I was going to say exactly the same thing Joni does. I think it's, a real personal choice with families about what they feel safe about. But, the more socialization you can get in the ways that you feel safe, the better. Kids need this age especially, need socialization. And so, whether it's Zooming with cousins, whether it's there's a cute little app called Caribou where you can play games online with other kids that are like only your family friends. So you have to, approve them, and then they can play games with one another. Whether it's, a socially distanced play date, whatever you feel comfortable with. But it is really, really important for kids this age to get social interaction.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I kind of look at this and I think, as we have had these conversations about ways to make the kids feel better, get through their day, kind of anti-anxiety and all of that, what are some more practical boots on the ground kind of tips that you guys can both throw at me for things to do physically in your day, inside or outside? I know you'd mentioned scavenger hunts and things like that, but I would love maybe your top three crazy ideas on how to entertain our kids not on a screen. Who wants to go
Well,
first?
I'll throw one out there. Abby sort of mentioned this, but like a mindful walk, sort of going outside, almost mixed with a scavenger hunt, right? Going outside and using all of your senses. You can even take a clipboard and a pencil. You could gather objects on your walk where you're looking at things, you're smelling things, and you're taking note of all the senses. Um, and then along the same, I think that sort of ties into a scavenger hunt too. You could come up with, oh, we're going to go on a walk and we're going to try to find things that are spiky in nature. We're going to try to find things that are round or this shape and sort of get them sort of engaged and outside. And I think inside, with crafts, I mean, I follow a lot of different art blogs. They're amazing. And I would say anything recyclable, you give kids just like tape and cardboard, and I mean, they'll go wild and have them build something. So a lot of, it doesn't have to be anything fancy that you spend a lot of money on, but I think if you can find recyclable materials at home and say, let's create a castle out of this, and have fun in that way.
Those are great.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We're very crafty in my house. So one of the things we did early on is we turned our front yard tree into a happy tree for our neighbors. And so what we know is doing things for others is actually increases the positive neurotransmitters in the brain. And so not only is it fun and it gives the kids something to do, but it helps with positive feelings as well. So we took model magic and cookie cutters and we made a bunch of little shapes. We painted them and then we hung them in trees like ornaments, hung them in our front tree. And then we also wrapped it in yarn. So we turned it into a happy tree. We also chalked our neighborhood early on in the pandemic. So we went all around to all of the houses and we decorated the front yard with chalk. So again, another thing to kind of increase the dopamine, but also wanting to, in a moment where we really couldn't connect with others, because it was like in March, April, May of last year, helping the kids feel connected to other people and helping them feel like they were doing something to make other people happy. That was really important for us in the beginning, where we really felt like we weren't connecting with anyone else, and the kids felt like they weren't doing anything for anybody else and felt very isolated. So it was a way to really feel connected to other people. We also, in the beginning, and this is now coming around again, but when kids couldn't graduate, we made, and they were putting those graduation signs in their yard, we made little graduation caps and candy bags for all the graduates in our neighborhood, and we walked around and anonymously left them on their steps. So just little acts for other people. So the kids kind of knew what it was like to give to others in our neighborhood.
I love that. That reminds me, that just reminds me of the little stones you see around town. And we do that a lot in our classes, little compassion stones are just powerful words and you place them around. And I've been seeing a lot of those when we're out and about. It's really great.
Yeah, I think we've also discovered my kids are very athletic. They have a lot of energy. They just constantly, when we keep them in the house, they go bananas and they're not super crafty. So we found for ourselves a lot of bike riding and parks and, you know, throwing footballs wherever we can or kicking the soccer ball. And honestly, I had to write a list to myself. I thought, okay, what can I find? Things in the area that are safe, you know, okay, fishing, maybe, I don't know, you know. So you have to really kind of push yourself to do that. But that's actually probably a good lesson for all of us anyway. Sometimes it gets too easy, I think, to clutter up our kids' schedules with classes or play dates or things where it's all so structured, their time pre-pandemic. And now they have a lot of unstructured time where all of us are trying to figure out, you know, how to entertain ourselves. And that's probably good for everybody. So I take that as a benefit for sure. I do have a question though, and I probably should have asked this a little bit earlier. Going back to the beginning of the pandemic, and then as kids are kind of maturing throughout the course of this year into maybe being a little more aware of the world around them, how on earth have you guys managed to explain this pandemic to them in a way that doesn't make them feel afraid to leave their rooms every day? Like, what is the best way to explain COVID safely but well to our children? Abby?
So, I mean, this varies kid by kid and it varies by age. You really have to feel out how anxious and how sensitive your kids are. I mean, some kids take it really matter of fact, like there's a virus out there and, you know, mom and dad are going to do the best they can to keep our family safe from it. Okay. And then other kids really need to be handled much more safely and they need much more of an explanation about it. So you really have to feel out your child and what's appropriate for them. And there are lots of really awesome resources on it. I think Sesame Street did an episode on it. I think Daniel Tiger did an episode on it, on how to explain this to your kid in a really age appropriate way. And I think accessing those resources is really the best way to go, and watching them first, of course, so you know that that's right for your child. isolating your kids from the news is really appropriate, because I think the news at this point is just overstimulating. Um, and just making sure you filter what they get. And then if you have a child who tends to be over anxious about this stuff, seeking help, because I think they tend to wind themselves up. And this is really something that's gotten out of hand. And I've seen a lot in my practice this year, obviously, is a lot of kids who it's gotten out of hand, their anxiety about it, and they're scared for their family and they're scared to leave the home. So definitely seeking help for that.
Yeah, and you have to see that in yourself first too, if that's you, and notice
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
you're displaying to your kids this fear, this anxiety, and not again, like we talked about before, not that there's anything wrong with that. That's how you
Right,
feel, but to at least
right.
acknowledge it. I noticed that with one of my kids who was suddenly, they were displaying in a very weird way that they were fearful, that they were scared. It
Mm-hmm.
was like they'd come off very, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, I don't want to go do that. I don't want to walk over there. I don't want to get the COVID.
Right,
So it
right.
can be it's a tricky thing. Again, uncharted territory. None of us have had to figure this one out, in our
Absolutely.
lifetimes. Joni, do you have any further advice for that?
I would say the same. I think it is about knowing your child and just even picking up on their cues if it is a time that you need to seek help. But I think it's also how you're framing it, right? So we talked about before, and that it is a scary time, and you can name that, but also talk about them, educate on what it is, talking about a virus and how do we keep our bodies safe and healthy. Like, what are all the things that we can do? And we talk about that a lot at my class, from exercise and mindfulness and all of these other strategies we have in addition to what we're seeing, the mask wearing, the distancing, letting them know like those aren't the only things to keep us safe, and that we do have a lot of control in our health and wellness, and there are these other things we do too. So that I think that maybe feels like a less scary too, when we know we can control other parts of our health as well.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you before we end this, do you have any final pieces of advice, especially for parents in Southern California whose kids are, let's say, under the age of 6 or 7? What are some things we can walk away with here that will help us navigate their feelings as we go into the pandemic and for at least another couple of months, hopefully not too much longer? Abby, what do you think about that?
I would say just to hang in there and keep your kids hanging in there, just keep the positivity up, but acknowledge that this is tough. And kind of walk them through that in that way, let them know that this is tough and it's okay that this is tough. And it's okay for parents that this is tough. But remind them that this will also end. Kids don't actually have the part of their brain where they can foresee that things like this end. That's not developed until late adolescence. And by late adolescence, we actually mean into their 20s. And so they can't actually foresee that. And so reminding them of that this actually will end and things will feel better, is really, really important. And sometimes we need that reminder too as parents. Taking breaks when we need it, taking care of ourselves so we can take care of our kids, to get through this, and knowing that hopefully this will end soon and things will return to some form of normal in a little
Ah,
bit.
let's hope so, right? Thank you. That's
Mhm.
great advice. Joni, what about you? What should we take with us today?
I would say the same. In addition, patience, right? And knowing that reminds me of sort of a mindfulness way of saying things. It's all temporary, right? Feelings
Hmm.
pass. Everything is just temporary. So if we can explain that to our kids, that we will hang on, um, keep a positive mindset when you can. You can always offset. This is hard, but I'm really grateful for this, right? Keeping that gratitude practice going. That's an exercise. From Susan Kaiser Greenland, book, Mindful Games, and she talks about a lot of ways that we can recognize the hard, but then offset it with, but I'm still fortunate in this way. I'm really happy about this. So I think keeping that going throughout these next couple months or however it lasts. And yeah, this too shall pass.
Great advice from both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me tonight. I think so many parents have gained so much knowledge and advice from tonight, so I much appreciate it. So Joni Flake and Abby Withy, thank you again for joining us. For all of you out there, make sure you follow the Beach Cities Health District on social media, as well as South Bay Mommies and Daddies. And if you're in South Bay, if you're a parent in South Bay area of Southern California, make sure you join the South Bay Mommy and Daddies Facebook group. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. I'm Laura Nickerson, and you know what? Stay safe out there. We're all in this together. Bye.